Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. It's that time. It is now Coffee for Your Soul, episode 6. So welcome everybody tonight. We're gonna have some fun. We have a full list of guests on our panel tonight. We have one person dialing in right now, so we're gonna have a good show tonight. So my name is John Frazier. I'm your main host with my partner Avalanche, aka Dimitri Geralt.
Welcome.
We have amazing guests being Dion Hendricks from Seller Kai.
How's it going, guys?
We have Janice Rockman.
Hey.
We have Gregory Brown.
Hello, everyone.
We have Shelly Fan from AskShelly.com.
Hello, everyone.
We got Gerard Davis from Pro DJs in Orlando. How you doing, Gerard Davis, this evening?
Thanks for having me.
Welcome. We have Nate Ferdinand, who does everything, builds everything. Welcome aboard. Nate TV. And we have Chilla Jerome from Crab Kings in Memphis, Tennessee. How's everybody doing this evening tonight?
Doing great.
What's good?
Good.
Well, so we're gonna get back into this is a requested topic again. We had episode 5 last week, and we talked about the burning, the massacres, destruction, and the fallout. It was so good, and the conversation kept on going for another 2 hours after our initial show ended. And we wanted to bring it back because we had a lot of requests because people still had questions. And tonight we brought some amazing talent tonight to talk about some things here. And we're going to get an opportunity just to kind of give it, the way we're going to run it tonight. As I mentioned before, we're going to kick off a topic. Everybody's going to have an opportunity to speak at least 3 minutes to talk about that topic. And then we're going to pass it to the next person if somebody wants to chime in. So I want to give everybody an opportunity to speak, share their thoughts. A lot of good information tonight. So feel free to ask questions, raise your hand. And if you have any questions that you want to do online, feel free to send us a message over. I'll pop up on the screen if you have a question for one of the panelists. So thank you very much for what you guys are doing tonight and taking the time to join Coffee for Your Soul. So we appreciate that. So just to kind of kick it off a little bit, Dimitri, what topic do you want to start off with tonight, sir?
We're gonna just ease into a little, conversation about the systematic racism, the system that was built initially from the slave trade and evolved all the way into a full-blown country. I think we forget that the nation was built on a lot of pain, a lot of evil deeds, and that doesn't take away the love that we have for our country because, we love our country. That's a fact. However, just because you love someone or a country or something, you don't just overlook its flaws because that's how we're going to make the nation that much better. I think emotions run deep and people get upset when we're having conversations about race, and naturally so because it's a touchy conversation and subject. The nation has blood on its hands. That's a fact. That doesn't mean, like I said, that we don't love our nation, but we have to talk about what happened so it doesn't happen again. So let's start with the fact that people seem to be able to take the Black Lives Matter catchphrase and attach it to anything that has to do with the struggle of the African American people. It's very easy to label a people or a movement or a shoe or a movie or anything and brand it, put it out in front of anybody and attach that brand to whatever subject, whatever movement that you want. And when you do that, you're able to control the narrative. Why? Because when people go out to go and protest saying Black Lives Matter, the intelligent people mean Black people haven't mattered in this country for so long. And it's time for you, the rest of the people, to understand that Black lives matter. It doesn't mean that Black lives are bigger, better, or anything else, to do with that. So the conversation is going to be about that, branding our movement and then taking that movement and controlling the narrative.
I think Beyond wants to go first. So Beyond, I'm going to kick off the timer for you right now. Go ahead.
Oh man, so much to say with that, but it's good that you started off with that topic. I just happened to watch today I think it was CNN with Don Lemon interviewing Terry Crews, and he was talking about that because mind you, what he was saying was that we should be aware of the political organization Black Lives Matter and what it stands for, and not let it control the narrative of the movement, right? But by him saying that right off the bat, then you understand that there is a clear delineation between the two, right? There is an organization called Black Lives Matter, and they may not represent everything that you want, right? But the movement is what most people are focused on. And I feel that the ones who don't focus on that are just the detractors. Their purpose is, hey, I'm going to detract from whatever you're saying. It's Black Lives Matter. Oh, all lives matter. Well, I mean, during July 4th, I shared a little meme with friends saying, instead of saying Happy 4th of July, I said all countries matter. I mean, how do you feel about that? You know what I'm saying? It's like, come on, you're being ignorant by saying that, B. Well, same thing. That's how people feel when we're talking about our movement and saying that our Black people's lives are important as well. Yet you try to combat it with, well, everyone's lives is important, and you're not saying that because you truly believe all lives matter. You just, in my opinion, you're saying it because you just want to undermine the movement and you want to focus on an aspect of what you feel to be fair. And that's, to me, when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, it's really talking about fairness. It's talking about equality for all. It's talking about justice for all. And I don't see how anyone could potentially debate that, right? If I say, this house is burning and it's important for us to call the firefighters for it, you can't say that, well, it's not important. It is important. And if you say, well, what about my house? But your house isn't burning. You know what I mean? Right. The house is important too, but it's not burning right now. And that's the only reason we're focused on that. And, but I do want to say, I try to be devil's advocate as much as possible, but nowadays people are tired of it. They're tired of turning the other cheek. You know what I'm saying? And yes, it is, from Terry Crews' perspective, for example, he just doesn't want us to go to a level of Black superiority when we're trying to reduce the rhetoric of white superiority, right? And I understand that, but you cannot discount from what people are focused on right now, and that is equality, and that's what that Black Lives Matter movement is really about.
Thank you very much, Beyond.
You need alarm.
It was a good start. So I like to pass that down. I like to pass the baton down to Miss Janice to go ahead and jump in next.
Okay, wow, that's a lot to follow up after. Those were good comments. And I do think it is such a broad conversation. I think if we think of it from a trauma-informed care standpoint and from a family system standpoint, and if we think about I want to almost call it like rebirthing of this nation, because the nation had already been birthed and established, and there were communities already functioning and thriving with our indigenous people here prior to colonization and prior to the transatlantic slave trade. But that being said, if you think about it like a system, we're all born into this family system. We didn't choose it, right? None of us, none of not Indian, Asian American, African American, Latin American, Mexican American, Native American, all of the Americans that are here, we were born into the system. And from a system standpoint, oftentimes when we start addressing issues of oppression and power and control, there's a lot of blame shifting that's done. And you see it across boards. When families sit in the room across from me and they want to start addressing addiction issues, or if they want to start addressing issues of abuse, or if they want to start addressing any kind of issues of abuses of power that have been patterned in nature and that have been permitted and that have been harmful to people over time, undeniably there's someone in the room that says, yeah, but we really are a great family. Like, yeah, but dad did his best, but mom, she really, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing in our country reflected. So I think what happens in our country at the nation state level happens at the local and at the individual level in our homes and our households, and our inability to look at ourselves is also our inability to look at us as a collective. And then to that degree, when you have folks that use, because abuse of power is never about what's being abused. So if it's economic abuse, it's never really about money. If it's sexual abuse, it's never really about sex. If it's violence, it's never really about physical violence. And in this case, it's not completely and really about race. And I'm going to say that, and I'll put that out there, and I get that some people might email me, and that's fine if you want to do that. Look for me online. However, I will say that the whole construct of race was an economic identifier. How can we identify masses of people and the greater global majority more quickly? So we can look at things like eye color, skin color, and hair texture to use to set up, systems of control. But with that being said, there's a lot of narcissism that happens with that. And with any kind of trauma, sometimes people have symptoms like hypervigilance and intrusive thoughts and things like that. But on the flip side of that, a lot of times you'll see people that have numbness, little or no memories, like a sense of disconnection or disassociation. Like, it wasn't that bad, was it? No, well, I don't quite remember it like that. And somebody's saying, no, this is exactly what happened. So I think if we can look at it from a broader perspective, it kind of depersonalizes it on some level. And if we can understand the way that the brain works with trauma and with violence, by the way, and the fact that traumatic experiences get locked and lodged and stored in our amygdala, which is our threat detection system. So every time it comes up, that stuff, that content, that debris is re-triggered because it wasn't properly processed through the front part of our logical brain. So that's all I'm going to say about that right now. And I'll come back for more when I have a chance.
Thank you, Janice. I would like to over.
Hold on, John.
I'd like to pass over.
Hold on one second. I wanted to elaborate too, because speaking about the trauma is really, we're talking about the trauma of what happened over the years, historically in the nation. And the reason why people use all lives matter, the retaliation with, that it's a terrorist group and all that stuff, and they label the movement negatively. It's because most people do not recognize that the trauma from those events and slavery and all the laws and systems that were built to sustain slavery, they don't think that that's still relevant now.
Right.
People do not accept that fact. And this is why this is really the topic of this show, the fact that trauma is still alive and well and manipulating the behavior of our people. And that's something, that's why it's very important for us to realize that. And I think that's a good teaching moment to let people know that that's true, because the side effects of post-traumatic stress disorder are clear. Yeah. And to say that those side effects are not relevant to the African American people and the nation as a whole would be ignorant. We have to address that. And anyone's free to take it from there on that.
It's trauma is transgenerational. It's multi-generational, but so is healing. But we can't heal till we can deal.
And Janice, there are elements in society that exist that remind you every day of it. That maybe not other people, maybe not some people, but many people get reminded. I mean, I want to go, and this is going to be a little bit tangent, but the Confederate flag, right? I know a lot of people would talk about, it's history and it's remembering our heritage and things. Come on, no, it's not. And if you want to be 100% honest, let's talk about when the Confederate flag made a resurgence. Pardon me, I don't know what's going on outside right now. But let's talk about when the Confederate flag made a resurgence. There were two periods in history in the 1900s that it made a resurgence. All of these Confederate statues and things that people are talking about bringing down right now, those things made a resurgence. It wasn't, we had the Civil War and now it just finished and now we're going to celebrate this guy because he was a hero. No, they were like, that was terrible. Let's forget about it. But then in the first period of time, like I said, there was two periods. The first period of time where it made a resurgence, the flag and these type of statues were put up, was around 1890 to 1921 or so. And what was going on then? There was a lot of blacks that were starting to establish communities and starting to, if I remember correctly, there was one year in particular where there was somewhere close to a couple 100,000 blacks that were registered to vote. And then the year subsequent to that, there was only about 5,000 that were registered to vote, right? And it was because of systematic things that were being put into place to bring it down, including the main topic of this show when we're talking about, burning our communities and seeing that we were prospering and then saying, no, I can't allow that. And then, they come in and take things down, right? So my whole point is that a lot of things are in our society, in our country right now that remind us every day of, that trauma. It may be subtle, it may be right in your face, but these things, the trauma will never go away if it's not addressed and admitted to, right? But then also all these things need to be removed in order to help this process.
In clinical psychotherapy, we call that gaslighting. And that's when a person who has done something abusive or oppressive tries to change the narrative to get the person that is expressing truth to get off of their sense of self so that they can go back and be trapped in their trauma. So
I'm seeing a lot of gaslighting online, a lot of it. It's like leading the way. And I'm glad you gave that a title, because I'm about to start putting people on blast, because that's exactly what they are doing.
Language matters.
Thank you very much. I want to pass it over to our next guest panelist, Mr. Gregory Brown. Would you like to jump in on that topic?
Two things. One, it goes back to a conversation I believe Nate and I were having last week during the show, was in regards to racism and classism and economic effects of racism. And I think Janice eloquently pointed out that, yes, racism exists, but understand the reason for the racism is purely economics. It's not just the fear of the color of our skin or what we represent, but it is a power structure. And in the battle of racism, I think last week we were discussing it, is we don't want to lose fact that the only way we're going to get past the power of racism is that, yes, we have to point it out, but we also need to pull our economic power, because that's what they listen to. You've noticed it happen. You're watching companies now bowing because Black people are getting together and saying, we're not going to spend our money with you. We don't like what you represent. I mean, one of the largest companies that makes money off of what we give them, Facebook, is struggling right now. Not publicly, but companies are withholding their ads, and you can see that it's hurting them in their pockets, which is why today the CEO, or not Zuckerberg, but what's her name? What's the lady's name? Thank you. She came out and made a statement that says that they want to reevaluate how they do business, and they've been working on it for 2 years. But the truth of the matter is, they didn't want to change that until companies started to fall to people demanding change and then saying, we're not going to advertise with you. Once we hit them in the pocket, we want to change the narrative. We want to get away from the racism. And that's the only way it's going to happen. Yes, there's a lot of trauma that comes with what's been happening to us for 400 years. But there's also some healing. And the way we move forward and we get to the healing aspect of it is we have to start realizing that the power is with us. Stop trying to go elsewhere to spend our money and use the power of our dollars. Use it within our own community. Then they'll start coming to us.
Okay.
Can I get 20 seconds?
Hold on, Beyond. I want to pass it to Shelly. Let's go around. Let's give everybody a shot. So Shelly, please jump in.
Absolutely. I just want to concur that it's an economic situation, and we have to really pull our resources together in order for change to happen. And I've been saying this for a long time, and I'm not saying that the riots and the protesting don't have an impact, but it doesn't affect any change. I follow a gentleman by the name of Joel Bernard, and he puts this so eloquently. He talks about the difference between neighborhoods versus communities, and how neighborhoods is a collection of people, and how communities is not only a collection of people, but these people are also unified in thought, vision, and goals, and their dollars bounce enough to where we are acquiring economic wealth. And so he breaks it down and talks about how the issue with our people, Black people, is that we are in neighborhoods and we go to other communities and we spend our dollars in other communities. So communities, right, like the Hasidic Jews, they are benefiting from the profits and the wealth that they are acquiring from their community and from others who are in neighborhoods who are coming into their communities to spend. And so he talks about the bouncing of the dollar and how I think the breakdown was, I thought I wrote down notes. I think for whites, the dollar bounces 8 to 12 times. For Hispanics, the dollar bounces 6 to 7 times. For the Asian community, their dollar bounces within their communities 13 to 14 times. And the Hasidic Jew communities, their dollar bounces 18 times. For Black neighborhoods, for the purpose of this conversation, we'll call it communities. In Black communities, their dollars bounce 0 times. He also highlights the fact that when we become educated, we do not spend money or try to build our neighborhoods. We will take our education and go into those established communities and spend our money and give our education there. And so in these communities, they have banks that are owned by the community members, stores that are owned by the community members. The people that are manufacturing their products is within that community. And so I truly believe that the answer is to strengthen ourselves economically as a people, to go back to a place where we actually have power. So where do we start with that? We do need healing, right? We talk about intergenerational trauma. And for those of us who don't want to accept that as truth, there are studies that clearly show that survivors of Holocaust, those who were Holocaust victims, generations and generations and generations after the Holocaust, that they have a predisposition to severe and persistent mental illnesses. So it's clear that trauma does go pass down from generation to generation to generation. What are 2 things that we need to heal? You need awareness. You got to be able to identify. Am I 3 minutes? We have to be able to identify trauma, right? I talk about the time that my business partner and I were on a panel in front of African-American males, and we were talking about aversive childhood experiences and how that promotes predisposition to mental illness. And these Black men were opposing this idea, because they didn't really buy into the fact that fatherless communities and other aversive experiences really put them in a position where they were predisposed to mental illnesses. We have to be able to understand what it looks like, how it manifests. We have to be able to be very clear about the symptomology attached to trauma. That's one. The second thing is safety. You cannot heal from trauma without being in safe spaces. And so what's safe? What's safe for us? What are we seeing every day on the television, what we're hearing on the radio and all of the comments on social media? It's very hard for people to perceive the safety that they need, especially in these systems that we are in, to truly heal from their trauma.
Okay, thank you, Shelly. I'm going to pass it over to Nate. Nate, feel free to jump in.
So I just want to start this off by saying Happy Independence Day. just to gaslight a little bit. Sorry, I'm joking. But I agree with what most of you guys are saying. Like Greg was saying, we were having this conversation the last time. It's just I have a hard line in the sand when we try to downplay racism. And I know that's not what we're doing here, but I just feel like it's my position to state again that yes, racism is generally for an economic advantage is what it is. Like, we're all the same on the inside. They just want to be able to classify people so that they can, use that as an advantage one way or another, the census, things like that. I get that. But saying to me, like, something is in the back of my head just ringing when we're saying if we get the money, we'll be okay. It's like we're talking about this and all I hear is, I'm not Black, I'm OJ. Okay. Like, when you're in those situations, I've had the privilege to be in some of those rooms with very affluent people. And there's another Black person there, but after that, you're still Black. Like, I know it's there for an economic reason, but we have to remember that some people, and I'm not saying this for everyone, but some people in high power are pure evil. Like, they don't care how much money you have. They have an instilled ideal, and they're going to take that ideal to the umpteenth extent. Like, I say that because, yes, we need to pull our communities together. We need to circulate our dollars. We need to heal from all the trauma. I agree with all of that. But what we cannot understate is that when we get to that point, we're like, great, we're all equal now. I have money. I've talked about my trauma. I know how to communicate with my neighborhood. And then you try to mesh with some of these people, and you're still going to get stabbed in the back because you're thinking it's not racism. Because it does play a factor. And we need to just remember that even though you have the money, even though we are now functioning well as a community, there are still people that will not like you because of the color of your skin, because that you're Asian, because that you're an immigrant, because that you're Black. We need to remember that. And as long as we remember that, I think we're 2 steps ahead instead of, letting ourselves take that stab.
So Shelly, I want to hold on. I want to pass it over to Schiller because I think we're trying to get a line before I can start doing it. But Schiller, go ahead and join into the call. Go ahead.
Yo, what's good, Jay?
Yeah, what's happening? So you like to join into this topic?
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure you can hear me. That's why I said that. So let me start back by saying that we highlighted several different points. From my standpoint, I would say that Shelly and I are on the same page, because I am a firm believer in that economics is critical and key. Now, as far as the 3 items she pointed out, as far as economic safety and PTSD, these are 3 things in which we control as a community. And she's absolutely correct. If we don't have economics in our communities, if we don't have safety in our communities, if we're suffering from PTSD because of the fact that we're not taking advantage of the community counseling available to us, that's on us as a community. I can't blame nobody else for that. As far as the whole Black Lives Matter organization versus the movement, I think it's very hard to separate the two, especially when you've seen the fact that it's, first of all, it is a political movement. It is a political movement. It is structured as a political movement, and it's funded as a political movement. So the idea of the fact that it's a grassroots movement, it's not grassroots. So I myself, I am of the Terry Crews, I am of the Marcellus Wiley camp, meaning that we can't sit there and isolate one issue that's maybe 1% of the Black deaths in our community and say, nah, I'm wrong for saying all Black Lives Matters when it comes to shooting in our community, when only 1%, I would say 0.25% of Black deaths are a result of police. So the other 99% is being ignored because we want to focus on 1%. I don't understand that logic. But hey, you know what? To each his own. I'm not trying to debate anybody, but that's just how I look at it. As far as when we talk about racism, Thomas Sowell said it best. So let's agree that America is just as racist today as it was in the 1960s, as it was in the 1850s, as it was in the 1700s. Fine, I'll accept that. Now what? Now what? Now, what are we going to do? Am I going to wait for the white man to apologize? Or I'm going to sit there and do like every other community and build on what I have?
Okay.
That's all I got to say.
Gerard, would you like to jump in on the topic?
Gerard, can y'all hear me?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
He's on mute.
Yeah. He's tough.
So go, John.
Go ahead. Yeah, go. So the conversation has developed into a very open conversation of things that we've all touched, things how we feel. just stepping back and listening to it, it has so many factors of where we're going. And I asked one point to one up what Schiller just said. What is next? What are we as a Black community trying to do? Are we? I don't want to get to the point when you step back and look like, you know, we're being divided and people are having all these. Everybody should have their own opinion. I totally get it. But are we doing this as a movement together? Are we doing this separately? Or to Shelley's point, it's like we need to invest our money into our own communities, right? Now, let me ask you a question. I think we talked about this with one of our guests before, Miss Robin. Is segregation the solution? Does anybody agree that that's
wait, John, hold on. We can't. I want to make sure we don't jump off into.
No,
but we will. If we bring in segregation, that'll go completely left. Let's stay exactly where we were, and addressing what is to do next. Because we'll also let's stay exactly where we were with it being a explanation that is on us to change our situation. It is on us to change our situation 100%. It's not we can't make it a blame game. We can't blame the white man anymore, but we do have to recognize that racism and the system of racism has brought us where we are, and know that where we are is a mental trauma, and that we have to address it from there before we address the economics, because someone with mental trauma and side effects and symptoms of PTSD is not going to be able to run a business. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. You cannot run a successful business with trauma on another level. Okay, so Bees and Shelley, let's
hold on. Before we do that, Gerard is back up. Gerard, would you like to answer that question before we pivot? Gerard, do you hear us? All right, Beon, go ahead.
So I'd like to respond a little bit to Schiller. First, with the Black Lives Matter movement versus the politics, the political organization. To say that no matter what, it's a political organization and that's what you got to focus on is completely not true. If you look at the fact that it's not only the U.S. that's protesting it, it's not only the U.S. that's using the term Black Lives Matter. That movement has gone global, where people in other countries are saying, listen, there's a ton of racist, systematic racism that's been occurring in my country also, and I support that movement. They're not concerned about the political structure of who originated the term Black Lives Matter in the US, right? But in addition to that, you know, when you say what next, first of all, I feel like what we're doing right now is what's next, because
exactly
people have reached a point where I'm tired of turning the other cheek. I'm tired of marching and protesting. I'm going to do that initially to let you know that we pissed, but I want specific change. I want certain laws that are in place that are part of systemic racism to be changed so that it helps us for the better. Then yes, it is on us after that. Once we could at least get a fair fight, right? Then yes, it is on us individually and us to come together as a community to then try to achieve your goals and to rise up. I got much more to say, but I'll let you.
Ian, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Ian, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And basically, we're gonna have. I'm just, and again, this is just me being Schiller.
Of course.
I need someone to tell me again. I haven't read. Again, I'm not the smartest person in the room. You follow me? I can always learn. I need someone to explain to me, to tell me what is it that we are being, how are we being targeted? I'm trying someone to explain to me how us as minorities are being targeted and what law is targeting us. You know, just so we can be clear.
I can name a few to start, but I don't know if you want to jump around a little bit.
Let Nate go, and then Greg.
Okay.
So number one, Sheila, I appreciate your point of view. That's number one. So I don't like when we say, you know, we're going to argue about something. This is intellectual debate, is what it is. So
we're not arguing. We're not arguing.
Yeah. I'm just putting it out there. One, when you say 2.5% of Black deaths are from, you know, police brutality, I'm not one to put out exact percentages because in just saying that, that's a false narrative. It's changing every day. We don't know the exact percent. What I can tell you is that we are disproportionately killed by the police that serve us than our white, Asian, Mexican counterparts. That is the problem. And when you say that's only 2.5% of our deaths, you're making it seem as if the other, 98, 97.5% is the issue. That's almost like insinuating black on black crime. We're not talking about crimes of proximity. If you are in the same community as another person, you are more than likely to be killed by that person. We're not talking about that. We're talking about our disproportionate death by police hands. White people get killed the same amount that we get killed. And let me put it this way, white crack dealers aren't getting killed the same amount that black crack dealers are getting killed. We are seen differently. So it's not that it's 2.5%, it's that it's a problem. I don't care if it's 0.00007%, it's a problem and we need to fix it. So it's not like saying, what about the other 97%? Once we fix this, we'll worry about that. Let's fix this first, and then let's worry about the next thing. We can't take everything at once, which is my stance.
So Nate, the one thing I know is we have limited resources in our community. We have limited financial resources. We have limited economic resources. We have limited education resources. Yes. You follow me? We are a community with limited resources. So if we accept that as the truth, I am looking for the things with the highest return. The things that are with the highest returns are the things that affects the majority of us. That is my approach. I'm not downplaying what you're saying. I agree with you. It's apples and oranges. But if you're telling me, Schiller, you have $1, where am I going to spend it? Am I going to spend my dollar focusing on police, black on black police brutality, or am I going to spend my dollar on focusing on the 99% of the other blacks who are being killed? I, Schiller Jerome, it's not you. I, Schiller Jerome, is going to focus that dollar and my time on the 99%. That's all I'm saying.
I have a 2-second response. And then you can change to whoever. The reason why people focus on police brutality is because it's the easiest to correct. Everything else, education takes politics, takes money. Resources takes more politics and money. We can fix police brutality now. That's why I focus on.
Okay, Greg, go ahead. Greg.
A couple of things that I wanted to point out. Now, while I appreciate what Sheila was saying, I do think that the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it's political or not, is debatable. I don't really care about that. I think that we're focusing on police brutality because that's the match that lit the fire. That's what got everybody involved in the movement. It's not that it's new, but the sight of watching the man get killed ignited the fire within a lot of people, and it started the movement. So while we have this energy, to what Nate is saying is, yes, let's take care of police brutality. That's one that we could fix right now. That's number one on the list, and then we can move on. So while it's only one, while it might represent a small percentage of what's happening in our community, the fact that it's happening in our community on Live and in Living Color got so many of us excited to the point. Here we are having this conversation on YouTube and whatever else social media platform about these things that are affecting us. Now, he also said, what other laws are affecting Black people? And like so many other people on this call, we can run down a list. You talked about things that affect our schools. Well, things that affect our schools, redlining is probably the most important thing that affects our school, because what they did with redlining was they carved out these neighborhoods. And in these neighborhoods now,
Nate,
the property
Greg,
values
hold on, Greg.
Hold on, Sean.
I'm saying about today. Hold on, Greg. I'm talking about Greg. My question is today. Redlining is illegal. I'm talking about today. We're talking about what laws are going on today. We're not talking about today.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, because redlining, while it might be illegal, still happens. And the way it happens is they go into neighborhoods, okay? They move out all the stores. You go into any of the pro-black neighborhoods. We both lived in Miami, so you know what I'm talking about. You go into neighborhoods in Little Haiti, you're not finding a Publix. You're not finding a Winn-Dixie. You're finding a small supermarket where you can't really get the produce and quality foods that you need. And then you get moved out of that. So what happens is people start moving out. Property values drop. When property values drop, you know what happens? Tax revenue drops. And that directly affects the schools in your neighborhood. While it might not be a law to redline, redlining still happens every single day in our country where people are moving in and out of neighborhoods. They lower the property levels. You know Miami as well as I do. Go drive down 82nd Street right now. When we were kids living in Miami, white people weren't riding their bikes on 82nd. Now there's cafes on the corner. They dropped the property values low enough so that they could come in, they buy it, we rent it out. Because if you're renting a property, you have no effect on your community if you're paying rent to someone else. Shelly talked about community. Ownership is part of that community. As long as you're paying rent, you're not affecting your community. If you own the property, you have a voice that can affect your community. I'm almost done, John. So those laws, while they are not written in black and white where we could read them, don't think that they don't exist. They do, and they're hurting us. And we have to be aware of those things that are hurting us. So they still exist. That's just one example. People give you 10 million other examples.
Hold on. Gerard, would you like to chime in?
Can't hear you, Gerard.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you. All right, Dimitri, go ahead.
No, when we real quick, and this is just to put it in perspective. When we talk about redlining, we're not talking about redlining now. Yeah, it does still happen. Yes, it's a little more under the table, a little more, creative, a little more just the legacy of what it used to be. But when you talk about redlining, you have to talk about $120 million over 40 to 50 years, only given, 98% given to whites, 98% of $120 million given to whites. That $120 million now is 3 to 5 trillion that stayed on the white Americans' bank accounts. Their legacy is stronger because of that. So when you talk about redlining, let's not say what it is now. Let's say what it created. It created the environment that we are in now. So that's what if we're talking about redlining, you got to talk about what it did, not what it's doing now.
But Dimitri is also in variations right now too. I mean, something like gerrymandering still exists, and that's a version of redlining because still to this day they're gonna change the line in order to affect voting, right? So we talk about there's a variety of things that happen that are still related to redlining, just in different forms. But I'll give you one I've been saying over and over for the last couple of episodes is the police brutality bonds. I could tell you that one, Schiller. The police brutality bonds is a system that, and I know that you believe in cognitive bias, and you've told me yourself before that you do believe that exists, but you don't believe racism is as strong as it used to be. So that same cognitive bias put in conjunction with something like a law that is these police brutality bonds that supports all of the lawsuits against against police brutality that financial institutions, insurance agencies, and cities are making money off of, then it doesn't give you an incentive to stop the police brutality, right? So that's a law combined with cognitive bias that disproportionately affects our people, right? And that's just one thing, and I could get into more detail with that, but I don't want to hog too much time. But I mean,
go ahead.
Kelly. Hold on, Gerard, go ahead. Can't hear you.
Mic's not working, Jay.
Go ahead, Shelly.
I just wanted to say, I think someone had commented, and this is not what I wanted to say earlier, but someone commented that police brutality has nothing to do with economic strength. My best friend is currently in a race to be, she's running for the Democratic seat for the New York State Senate. And trust me and believe that it is about money. Putting people in positions where they can change policy and legislation has a lot to do with money. I just want to say that. Now, in talking about the Black Lives Movement, one of the things that Janice said when she, right before she started speaking was, wow, that's pretty grand, right? And when we're talking about change from a psychological perspective, change cannot happen unless there is a target, a very specific target, in order for us to all get on the same page about. And so when we're talking about that, I'm not sure where that's coming from. Do you hear that echo?
There we go.
Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. And so when we're talking about change, we have to make sure that we can get on the same page about what the Black Lives Matter movement is all about. And so if we are going to target police brutality, let's make sure that we are targeting police brutality first, that is the target, and we are all coming on the same page against that. Greg said earlier, like, okay, once we target that, then we can talk about other disparities and go for education and then go for health disparities and then go for, but we got to get on the same page about what we are targeting right now. And I totally agree, Nate, that best starting place is police brutality. That needs to be the target right now. That is what change is about. As a psychotherapist, when people come in and they have all of these goals, 20 goals, 15 goals, things that they want to change or things that they want to work on, we have to what, Janice? We have to
Can y'all hear me?
on that one or two things, because behavior change does not happen that way. So we need to target, and we all need to get on the same page collectively about what this movement is truly about.
Gerard, can you go ahead?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I can barely hear y'all. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, I hate to sound like a Debbie Downer right now, but this is part of the issue. How many weeks have y'all done this? And y'all couldn't take 10 to 15 seconds to give me some troubleshooting to figure out how I can get my mic on? That's part of the issue. We're talking about economics. We're talking about all this other, excuse my language, all this other shit. And that is not going to mean a damn thing if we don't change our hearts and our minds for each other. And that's the number one thing. And until we do that, all of this means nothing. And I heard some points earlier about the Black Lives Matter. It is very clear that some people, they're with the movement, and some people have a problem with the organization itself. There is a separation already within the Black community involving that. And it's specific. Some people don't like the founders. It goes back to 3 lesbians that don't want anything to do with heterosexual men and all this crap. And you can sense that they're trying to, how can I use the word, market. I mean, everything's a market now. The race car driver is selling T-shirts. I mean, come on, guys. Until we get our minds and our hearts in one place, and let's be real, it's going to be divided. We had MLK and we had Malcolm X. It's going to be divided. We're never going to agree. Somebody going to want to fight and somebody going to want to do the peace thing. That's the bottom line. And racism isn't going anywhere. They don't want it. They designed it specifically for this reason. This nation was built off a ruling and a working class. And unfortunately, we were a part of that working class. And now, with the illegal immigration, of course, we don't need you no more. We don't need you no more. You see what I'm saying? And hold on, let me see. It was something else. Let's see. All I matter. Oh, to be honest with you, I know this is probably a little bit deeper than what we're saying right here. But the all lives matter is really, that's divine. Because you're human. You are going to forget all the other lives. It's inevitable. That's what they did. And they're basically, what you don't know, and we're talking about disproportionate numbers according to the police. Okay, I'm sorry, you guys. I hate to say this. I used to hate when people do that, but I'm an engineer, and I know numbers. And darling, it's very clear. 287 whites, they got more whites than us. More of them are going to die. I know personally people that have inboxed me, and they have told me their experience, and all of them were white. See, that's the problem. The problem is we don't care about humanity, period. All we care about is getting our agendas pushed. You understand what I'm saying? And that is what's going to happen. I'll end it on that. We're going to turn it to them if we're not careful and being considerate. Because bottom line is we can say it's unfair, but it's not going to change until we change.
All right, Janice,
I'm done.
Go ahead, Janice. Thanks, Gerard.
Yeah, sure. I think from a clinical mental health and wellness standpoint, when you do triage, you have to sort of look at crisis management and crisis intervention. And I think that it's important that we kind of move away, or at least consider moving away from all or nothing thinking. I don't think that it has to, like all or nothing thinking is kind of considered to be a cognitive distortion or a type of cognitive distortion. So in other words, part of the solution when we're triaging something, it can be both and. It doesn't have to be either or. And I do think from a neurological standpoint, because the brain has all of these grooves and all of these lines that form patterns and habits over time, we also have to look at neuroplasticity and look at, for example, so I do officer-related engagement training and trauma-informed care with law enforcement. And so we also have to look at those grooves and those patterns and those habits that have been formed, not just transgenerationally, but within each individual, so we can change the collective. But it doesn't necessarily mean that when you're looking at like a systems approach, you're looking at different dimensions of wellness. You're looking at different dimensions of healing. And I don't necessarily think that it has to be just one is right and one is wrong. I think it's going to take a collective movement. And I think it will take a singularity of thought, to this gentleman's point that he just brought up, a singularity of thought that we can collectively address some of these issues, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to happen in one way. Because when you triage, you have to start with the biggest bleed out or the biggest point of crisis and then move from there with treatment planning. And so if we look at it like that, it can kind of reframe the conversation just a bit.
So who wants in? Go ahead, Nate.
So, wow, that's a lot. Janice, I agree with what you said. The problem I see with that, and one of the problems I see with our community in general, holistic triage or trying that change isn't sexy. Like, people don't want to take, layers upon layers, and they don't want to think that it's going to take more than our lifetime to fix this. People are selfish. They're selfish as shit. So they want it now, which is the wrong ideology. This is something that was way before us, and unfortunately, it'll probably be way after us. But we need to start, like we were all saying, with that one singularity, with that one thing. Let's peel that tiny layer back, and then we can go from there. We'll snowball it, just like debt. Sheila, I'm pretty sure you can agree with this. If you're in debt, what are you going to do? You're going to go for the smallest amount of debt. Once you do that, you can snowball what you were using for that and go to the next one. That's what we should be doing. The only other thing that I want to say in what Gerard said is a big ball, but you work with numbers. We're talking about proportions. I don't want to get too elevated, but I don't like when people say, I have personally known people and they were all this. We are a microcosm. And I know it's hard to think of yourself as like a small number, but your proportions mean nothing. My proportions mean nothing. If I tell you every day I got stopped by the police and harassed, that means nothing for the overall cause of how many times Black people get harassed. Why do we say that? Your one opinion has nothing to do with the proportions of the Black community, of the white community. You are one person that knows 500 people in a billion sample size. Like, let's stop saying that. Please, can we stop saying that? And I'm done.
Go ahead, Greg.
There's a gentleman in here, Ron Baker. I don't mean to call you out by name, but he says a clear slogan would be Black Lives Matter with police brutality. And with all due respect, I think that's where we're going a little bit off script, is that when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not just talking about the killing of Black lives or the taking of Black lives. We're talking about Black lives in the workplace. We're talking about Black lives in education. We're talking about Black lives in how loans are doled out. We're talking about the whole aspect of what it means to be Black. We're not just talking about a Black man getting killed. Black Lives Matter is more than just Black lives, us being alive. Black Lives Matter means, okay, if I work in the same place with a white man and I'm better than him, why am I only making 81 cents to the dollar that he's making? That's an issue with Black Lives Matter. So it's not just a thing of killing Black people. It's about treating us like we are human beings, as they quote unquote say that we are all equal. Another thing is that, and Gerard knows I love him to death. Agree, disagree. One thing is, in the whole Black Lives Matter, yes, all lives matter, and it is a deeper philosophical, theological point to that. But the people who are killing us, setting up these systems that are meant to oppress us, always lean on their religion and their God. And I don't want to get into a religious debate with anyone or get into a religious discussion, but they use religion a lot as a reason why they do the things they do. They will come and have a hanging and hang us from trees, and they'll have somebody hold the Bible and say a prayer and preach. And at the same time, they're hanging someone, but they're saying they're doing God's work, and it's divine. So you can't say that you're a religious person and you're a Bible thumper, but then you're doing the things you do. Where's your morality? So when people use religion to describe the all lives matter thing, if all lives matter, why are you treating us the way that you treat us? If all lives mean so much, why are you so careless with how you treat our sons and daughters, you know, who are walking home from school, going to the store, at the library? Why is it, if all lives matter, I can send my daughter into a shopping mall, into a store with another little kid, one of her classmates, she'll get followed, but her classmate will be okay. But then they'll tell you they're doing God's work. It's divine. They believe in this. That's not how you could say all lives matter. So when people say that, oh, all lives matter, I have an issue when they try to bring God into it, because you can't read the Bible and say you're bringing God into it and treat people that way.
Go ahead, Gerard. Go ahead, Gerard. Hold on, B. Go ahead, Gerard.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Go.
Can you hear me? Okay. There we go. All right. First of all, I wasn't specifying. Specifying like categorizing it as a Christian or any type of thing like that. What I'm trying to get us to understand and for us to grasp is some of the old school principles, kind of like the post I put up with Olivia Pope and her father. Always remain twice. We have to work twice, and sometimes 3 and 4 times. You see what I mean? And we're trying to make something happen that is never, and I promise you, never going to happen. There is a level in white supremacy. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, damn. I don't know. Y'all low. But anyway, the point I'm saying is, being born in the United States, you always, as a black person.
He's on mute now.
He muted himself.
Can I get 60 seconds?
So, John, can I go ahead?
Go ahead, Beyond.
I'm sorry, Sheila. I just want to say 2 quick things. One,
No, go ahead.
to Ron Baker and what Greg was saying, I do agree with Ron to the extent that marketing has been one of our problems. Not just our problems. There's been problems, especially on the Democratic side. I'm independent, but I see that on Democrats, they're terrible at marketing compared to Republicans. Because honestly, I hate the fact that we even have to say this, but truthfully, if it was said, if the slogan was Black Lives Matter too, they still find something to argue about, but maybe that would have been a little bit better, right? Same thing with defund the police. I hate that statement because I know what it means, but I know it's just giving them ammo, especially going into the political season. Oh, look, they don't want to have no police. No, that's not what it means. You know what I'm saying? So you do have to be considerate about marketing to an extent, because no matter what, the detractors are going to find things. Exactly. Marjorie said we shouldn't have to work twice as hard, but oh no, she's not talking about marketing. The last thing I wanted to say is regarding the religious aspect of it. I had people who tell me, well, okay, you're part of the Black Lives Matter political organization. And I say, no, it's the movement. Not that I don't really care about the organization. And they say, well, you should care because it still represents you. Well, I mean, you're a Christian. Christianity has done some of the worst atrocities in history. So does that mean that you shouldn't be a Christian because of what happened during Crusades and what happened when they burned people in the name of God and things? No, you're taking the positive foundation of it and building upon it, right? So the same thing. I understand that it may not have been founded by people who I agree with for everything, but the movement is important to me, and the movement is important to our people, and that's what I'm focused on.
Okay. We're gonna so we got a couple seconds, but I'm gonna go around the horn. Dimitri, what would you like to leave our guests with tonight?
I'd just like to leave everybody with the fact that economics is an issue. Enough people in politics is an issue. Violence in our neighborhoods are an issue. But all of those things cannot be solved until we are aware, the keyword being aware, that our minds are severely traumatized, not only from what I believe is genetic inheritance, but behavioral inheritance. We learn from our parents, our grandparents, and our environment. If you're 400 years, you're raised on a plantation where white man is the man and he's slaughtering and killing and then raping, and you're going to fear that man, period. I don't care. It's going to take generations before you're like, white man ain't master. On top of that, you put white Jesus, blue eyes. Now your God is white. This played a long, all this stuff plays. It's still, you have to be, if you're not aware of this, then you can't make the change. We know what the problems are. We have to start with our minds getting healed, and then we can fix those problems. So,
Shelly, what would you like to leave our watchers tonight with?
You did say Shelley and not Schiller.
Shelly.
Okay. I just want to say, and I feel like a broken record, I've been saying this so much, is that healing has to start with exposure. Sometimes we see exposure as a negative thing, but exposure is necessary for healing to occur. And if we are going to expect other people to be healed, we have to make sure that we heal ourselves. Implicit bias, that unconscious bias, is attitudes and behavior, like a belief system that guides our attitudes and our behaviors that are in our unconscious mind. We cannot change unless things are in our conscious awareness. So let's all take the personal responsibility to expose those biases and make sure that we're working really hard to overcome them if we expect others to do the same. Greg,
would you like to leave our watchers with tonight?
Thank you for having me, and listen to Black in the Days podcast. It's really good.
What would you like to leave our watchers with tonight?
Who'd you say, John?
Janice.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. So I would just say that, who we are is in part psychosocial. So who we become and who we are, we carry a genetic component, as he was just mentioning. And then there's a social and a psychological component. And there have been studies that show that about every three generations, there is a radical shift where someone decides that they're going to begin to change the fundamental patterns that have existed within that generation. And so I think that we don't get to choose our trauma, but we do get to choose our healing. And so I would just say, please continue to, if you haven't already, reach out for resources and support so that you can heal. And then you can give what you are and bring that and show up in the world with your healed whole self.
Thank you, Janice. Nate, what would you like to leave our watchers with tonight?
This show is wild. I'm going to leave with facts, and that's it. Black people are disproportionately policed. They're disproportionately killed. They are disproportionately imprisoned. And we are not different than Asians, Mexicans, white people. Those are facts. There is something wrong because we are disproportionately affected in a negative way. And it has nothing to do with our skin color. It has nothing to do with our skin color.
Schiller, what would you like to leave our crowd with tonight, our watchers?
My task in life is to create as many jobs as possible and hire as many folks as possible who look like me, providing the opportunity. I think if I do that, I'm doing my part as far as the change. Trauma costs money. Counseling costs money. Shelly's not cheap. Janice is not cheap. So I can't pay them if we ain't got no money. So say what y'all want. Get the bag. Then we discuss everything else.
Gerard, what would you like to leave our crowd with tonight? Beyond, what would you like to leave our crowd with tonight?
Man, I just like that we come together. We can have these conversations. I think it's important to have actionable items always, and see where we could go. Where do we want to be in a year from now, and how do we get to it, right? And we can start breaking that backwards and start. We have to tackle things one thing at a time. You know what I mean? So I understand that there's tons of other areas that Black people ourselves have to focus on as well. But like Nate said, right now we're talking about this. We're talking about police brutality. We're talking about systemic racism. Then we also, or concurrently also, must look at everything else as well, like Schiller and Gerard said.
Okay. So this is episode 6. I just want to say thank you to every one of the guests that were able to attend tonight. Your input does matter. People watching it ask questions. They've made comments tonight, curious, trying to push the conversation. Like Robin said, these conversations are important. It is exhausting because there are so many opinions and the things that we're trying to do, but we're trying to do it together. So the needle is being moved. We cannot stop. We cannot stop. The reason why everything is happening right now is that there is no entertainment, no sports. That's going to change at the end of July. We cannot stop what's going on and keeping the conversation moving. You have everybody here. Feel free. Go on Facebook, Instagram. I've tagged everybody here. If you want to follow them on Instagram, they're available. Beyond, what's your Instagram handle?
I got so many, but it's Bjorn_Bees.
Dimitri, what's yours?
At Avalanche, all E's.
Janice, what's yours?
J Rock Therapy.
Greg, what's yours?
Gregory Brown 23.
Shelly.
Ask Shelly.
Nate, what's yours?
Photophobic Nate.
Schiller, no, for skip you. And Gerard don't got that. So, all right, thank you very much for the episode 6. We're going to go into the after show. This is where we kind of can talk a little bit more. So next time, if you're interested in being on a future show, reach out to myself, Avalanche, or Max, who couldn't be here tonight. But tonight, we're going to have a good conversation. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining tonight. We appreciate it.
Great job.